Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nedling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Nedling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am excited to talk with Miroslav Petrovic. And let me tell you about Miroslav. Miroslav is a TEDx speaker, teacher, and a facilitator who has worked with over 5,000 people across the world, supporting them to bring their message to the world. He is the founder of the Enlivened Speaking Institute, where he teaches speakers how to go beyond didactic presenting to delivering their message in a powerfully embodied way that is enlivened and engaging for audiences. His message and off the beaten path approach speaks to thought leaders, future visionaries, progressive educators, and transformational leaders who are empowered to move away from traditional speaking, teaching methodologies, and embrace a deeper, more conscious way of communicating through mind, body, and spirit. He is fascinated by how we can be more fully alive with everything we do and believe that being in connection with our own personal presence is the most powerful, dynamic relationship we have in life. So I always love to talk about authentic communication. And so I thought today that would be an awesome theme for us to have. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Miroslav Petrovic. Miroslav, as a fellow speaker, it was so exciting to see your profile come across, and I was excited to have you on.
Thank you. It was lovely when you added me on social media, and I was like, oh, we have a few mutual friends as well.
Yeah,
which
good.
Doesn't always happen when we're, living in separate continents.
Well, I'm a Toastmaster. I have friends all over the world, which is awesome. So we always start out with easy question, and the easy question is, tell everyone what part of the country or the world do you call home?
So I live in Australia. I'm like an hour north of Byron Bay, is what I usually say to people. So the east coast of Australia.
My niece is there right now. She does work for, I don't know, some kind of, not Doctors Without Borders, but something like that. Mara Post or something. Anyway, my niece is there in Australia for the second or third run. So we wanted to really, we gave all the accolades about what you do and why you do it isn't really in there. So I'd love for you to share your backstory. What took you from maybe where you were when you were just out of college or just out of college age to where you are just today?
I like the way I asked the question, Vicki. Like, I'm just going to go there. So in college, I actually studied photography. It was film and photography. I thought I was going to study film. I fell in love with photography. I ended up finishing both just because I thought it would be a good idea. And I remember my first job out of college. The guy who was assigned to teach me, it was a portrait studio photography place. So we were taking portraiture, like families, couples, individuals, blah, blah, blah. And the guy that was mentoring me, he says to me, he's like, okay, you spent 3 years learning this. And now when you get out there and you start shooting, and when you get in here and you start shooting, you're an entertainer, not a photographer. And I was like, why did I just spend 3 years with this? But he was also like, the photography has to be like background noise. It's like when you drive a car, you don't think about the weight of your foot on the pedal. that's how well you have to know your photography, because your real job now is to entertain people and to capture those like genuine moments from them in that engagement, which is very much communication. And that was very scary for me. I was very comfortable being behind the camera. And, you know, what I found I loved through my years as a photographer was the connecting. I didn't really care too much about shutter speeds and apertures and the latest Photoshop technique. I was like, I really just love connecting with people. And like where I used to hide behind the camera because I was quite shy and awkward, it kind of took me towards this point of like, I think I just want to connect with people without the camera at one point. Like it's a burden to have to do editing after I've connected with people. So that's some of the early days. This story has many different side rivers that lead into the central channel, if you will.
That's the beauty of our lives. It is a journey. And as I say, it's up to you to enjoy the ride. The another connection we have, I love photography too, but I think one of the things you touched on was being that entertainer. I find that the best shots oftentimes are the ones where people don't know you're taking them, when they're just living, they're just being, they're authentic. And so in speaking, some of the best things that we can teach our clients, our people whom we're coaching, is just to forget about the camera, right? And just be there, be themselves. Sometimes it's hard.
Yeah, I think whenever we pull out the camera or whenever there's an audience, it's like there's and this is a very subtle distinction, but it's like there's a bracing or a performing that starts happening. And like for me, there's a difference between putting on the outfit of like, okay, I'm gonna entertain and perform and, you know, watch me be a clown and jump around, and going to the authentic sense of like, yes, the entertainment has to happen because people want to listen, but can that be from an authentic place? Like what happens if I'm not putting on a mask to give people a show, but I'm actually connecting and we're creating entertainment from an authentic place?
Yeah. And it's not, when you think entertaining is not always making you laugh or putting on a show, if you will. A lot of times it is those other senses that we have. It is all about being vulnerable and tender, and that's the connection that you mentioned. That, you know, I could think of myself as a connector, but it's that connection that makes people interested, that make them want to listen more and listen more, and that is still entertaining.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the most entertaining things is ourselves. Like for everyone, they love their own story. And often I find myself telling speakers, just like ask a question here or there. Realize that your story is not unique to you, but involve the audience in it. Who else has experienced this? How many of you have had a similar experience? I'm like, that's entertaining because now we're all on the journey with you, not just listening to you.
Absolutely. So how can public speaking boost your profile as a coach?
This seems to be, at some point, most coaches seem to see that this is a good migration pattern because you're scaling your time. So you can reach more people, do more work, create more transformation with less effort. You know, if you're doing one-on-ones, like
it's a lot of effort.
yeah, with just one person. And also what that does is when you start scaling and you're running groups of 20 or 30 people, let's say, it's like now your one-on-one time goes up in value as well, because you're not relying on it to make you income. And if you do want to keep doing it, you can charge a premium because most people are only receiving you in a group container. It's like having multiple offerings, really.
Yes. So whenever you start out public speaking, you know, we often, I think, charge less than we're worth oftentimes. But how do you get people to 10x their profit as a speaker?
By essentially, it's selling from stage. Now, a lot of people have an aversion to that word, and there's different ways to do sales. It can look like, you know, run to the back table, or it can also look like, hey, how many of you enjoyed today? Great. How many of you might be interested in doing some more work with me? Let's let's hook up, have a coffee, have a chat at some stage after this, and just see what that can look like. And then you recognize that one talk. Just recently, a client of mine did a speaking gig, and she came back and she made $11,000 from a free speaking gig. And at that same gig was another person we knew that was speaking. And this client was like, that other person was a better speaker than me, but they didn't make a single dollar. She was like, and I was like, they couldn't even see the opportunity. Like, recognize, because of the experience you've had with me, you can see opportunities, you know what to say, you know how to convert them. For some other people, it's like, oh yeah, it's just another gig for me to practice myself. And I think this is the difference when we utilize speaking, not just something as we love doing, but we recognize it's a life calling. It has to be profitable for us to keep doing it. And the more profitable it is, the more people we can reach through doing it. So it's almost like a service to learn how to create an income from speaking beyond just the passion and love many of us have for it.
Right, exactly. So how would you say to someone just starting out as a speaker, these are the 3 things that you should first work on? I know it's individualized, but in general, what are the 3 things that maybe would help someone just starting out as a speaker?
Yeah, so I'll answer your question in 2 ways. I have this model of like the 4 different levels of speaking. The first one being from incompetence to competence. If people are incompetent, and by that I mean it's like, terrified, can't get words out, the mind goes hazy and we forget all the things. It's that and most speakers go through this, by the way. So if you are going through that level, just understand, when you see people on stage, there was probably a moment where they went through incoherence as well. So the first thing you want to work through there is basically exposure therapy. Get used to fear. The most common thing people say to me when they want to come to a training is, I just want to get rid of the fear. And I laugh and I say, you don't get rid of the fear, you integrate the fear. You stop being afraid of the fear. Fear becomes like sunshine. It's just like, oh, it's just an experience moving through my body. There's not even a need to call it fear. It's quite pleasurable as well. It's like it focuses the mind by itself as you're about to step on stage. So that first stage is really just get comfortable being on stages, make your own stages, go do open mic nights wherever you can. Just like take in the audience through that way. It's like building a relationship with an acquired taste or something. The second part from there, like when people have a degree of competency, and we define competency as different things. For me to be competent on stage, a speaker needs to be able to connect to themselves, be able to connect to the audience, and be able to connect to the bigger piece. Like, why are we here? Bringing through the message, letting that land and letting it move through the room. And I would also say not all speakers are that level of competence. Some of them are just consistent. They've memorized their talk. They can just get out and be consistent without not necessarily being fully connected to themselves or the audience. They're just like reciting a thing they memorized at home. So I'm like, they've kind of skipped the competency and just gone into consistency. And that's okay. Like, you can produce results from consistency as well. And that can be useful if you're just repeating the same talk over and over. But for people that are exploring that edge between, like, they're comfortable on stage, they're not panicking. It's like, now it's like, okay, how can we develop more competency? It's about noticing what parts we're running away from. And this is going to be different for everyone. I probably have 12 different categories this goes in, but one of them is something like movement. If you're someone that's pacing all the time, just explore slowing down. Get used to taking up space on the stage. If your stories are told in a very meta way, so meta is like, I'm telling you, it's like the cognition above the story, or it's almost like the narration about the story.
Right.
It's very different. Like what we're doing now is meta. Whereas if I go into telling you a story the way I just did with that woman that got on stage, it's like we have more building blocks. It's usually more vulnerable. And the deeper you go into the story, the more vulnerable it gets. So if you start giving people dialogue and descriptions and how you felt at the time, you're going to create a lot more engagement. And it's more of a threshold for the nervous system. It's easier to hang out in concepts. So this is usually where I invite people to start slowing down. And this is a skill set you start practicing, not just in the early days, but if you want, like, my fascination is really the mastery of speaking and communication. you recognize that this pathway just keeps opening and opening and opening and showing you where you can be more deeply engaging and connected to people.
So I think it's really important, for the authenticity, though, to be able to be that connecting person. How do you help them figure out, if they haven't, their why and their purpose, so that that that's always and connecting to the audience in their message?
My go-to question, if this was your last week or last day on earth, what would you want people to know? What would make your life, what would make your life valuable, knowing that this is the piece that you gave back to people?
What are you going to leave as your legacy? So why do you think in business it should be all about relationships? And I do agree with you, by the way.
It's funny you asked this. We run a stage here where we live on the Gold Coast called Fuck Up Nights. It's a global stage. We're just the local licensees. But it's amazing. Like, my business and my relationships with business have always been, there's an intimacy. And we have had a lot of people get up on stage and tell us their failures. And sometimes the failures are not even personal. It's like, you realize there's a lot of people out there that aren't doing business from a point of relationship. They're just doing it from a point of how I can get the most I can get, which is kind of sad. I mean, for me, life is relationship, and business is essentially, who do we like working with? That's what it comes down to. And for me, learning to speak on stage, the skill set is really communication. And you start recognizing that everything that we have in our life, the people we're with, our intimacy with our friends and family, the dates we've gone on and haven't gone on, the promotions and career opportunities and sales we've made, all of this is really communication. And you start realizing this is probably the most important skill set you can have in life, because it's going to open or close your doors. And it's largely like automatic. You know what I mean? We're just communicating, and often we need to be in the moment. So we're going to say whatever's available to us. And if our communication window is this small, and I'm holding my hands quite close, it's like we're going to be stuck in having a certain relationship with life and in business. And we can open up that threshold, maybe get more comfortable with silence, maybe start making requests and asking for what we want. Suddenly that starts opening up in business and in life. And I think authenticity is a real power here. It's like, who are we when we're not pretending to just go after the thing, or when we're authentically in alignment with that thing as well?
I work with the youth as well as adults, and a lot of the the kids in my one group are from a kind of disadvantaged area, and talking to them about why they should improve communication, communicate at all in words, orally, not just in text. It's interesting to try to reach them and understand that everything we do really requires us to improve, always, constantly pivot in our communication skills. Everything that they want in life hinges on that. And it's sad that sometimes they won't see and they won't notice, they won't recognize it until years later, and we always get smart in our 30s as we realize, oh crap, my mom and dad did know something. But it's just interesting how everything that we do, not just wanting physical or material things, but what do we want to be, and to be able to really share that with people and share their story, all relies on them being able to communicate. And some of them have big hurts and traumas that if they could communicate well, they might be able to get through that, but they have to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's harder. Like, I definitely think the possibilities for communication open up after we get through, like, the school system. So it's like, it's very entrenched. And I look at my experience and when I've spoken in high schools as well, it's like there's a lot on the line. If you say something and it's not received or appreciated, you have to live with that for, years to come. It's like, and sometimes those things, like what you get teased or bullied about, what people remember, it's like they stick. Whereas I find communication post that stage gets a lot easier. It's like people are forgiving. It's easy to change circumstances. It's easy to change a job, and we can allow ourselves to keep growing and expressing parts of ourselves without being, confined in the social pressures of a schooling environment.
Yeah. One of the kids was saying that he writes music, and that helped him get through some tough times he had from when he lived in another state. And I said, well, that's communication. It's just music. Like for me, some of the stuff I train with, I refer to music to have them understand vocal variety and pitch and pace and all those wonderful things that make us interesting as we speak. And you could see a little bit of a light bulb going on. He was starting to get it. But, you just have to reach out to people where you can, how you can.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are two key pieces of advice that you would like to leave the audience with today that would help them either grow as a new speaker, or maybe you've just been doing this for a while and it's got stale, it's got old, and you don't know what to do to really bring back your love of this or your attraction to others?
This is good. One of my favorite things is bringing up people's magic on stage. And unless you're sharing the magic of who you are when you're on stage, it's like, it's just half of what's there. It's like when we had radio and we didn't have TV. I kind of feel communication's the same. Yes, we can utilize the two-dimensional words are coming out of my mouth. There's pitch and there's tone and there's pace. And that can also be completely devoid of feeling. And what I've seen time and time again is the speakers that are willing to come from a place of feeling, and this is authenticity. Like to speak from feeling, you have to be authentic with people. You can't create feelings because that feels very fake. If you've ever had a bad experience with a used car salesman or a real estate or something, it's like we know what fake excitement looks like. Whereas to let ourselves be vulnerable with who we are and allow the room into that vulnerability, that's really where the transformation is. Like when I teach storytelling, I often tell people, forget the storytelling techniques. Consider that you have an experience, a memory, and your role is to just let the room into that so they can feel and experience something in life that they haven't. And that's fundamentally different than, storytelling techniques. It's like, it's an act of opening yourself so they can reach into the experience you've had and hopefully learn something from it. And sometimes it's just one little question. I was teaching a group the other day and this one man told us about his grandmother. I was like, how did your grandmother look? And the story just opened up. It's like we went from, monochromatic black and white to color just as he started describing her. He started crying. And in his world, like, he didn't need to describe his grandmother. She looks the way she looks. But for us, in those words, like his love and how much she helped him when he was younger, and and she taught him to read, and all of these things just started flowing when he started describing her. And I think that's the magic of speaking. Like when we get into consistency is good, and it can be easy to fall into the trap of just doing what we've always done. And the magic for me is really like mastery. It's like, how do we keep growing as speakers and pulling ourselves out of the identity we've been in?
Yeah. I always tell people, it's like the book Harry Potter or the series Harry Potter. They could have just said they were in a castle and they were, witches and goblins and all those things. And it was accurate, but it wasn't engaging. It wasn't memorable. It didn't take us there. I love that you mentioned that. You need to take them there. So many great speakers will, just take you on this journey with them where you feel what they feel, you see what you can, if they're really good, you can smell things. And And that's what makes you want to hear more and are at, edge of your seat. I love how storytelling can make any kind of presentation wonderful. And I always talk about the fact that a great presentation, a great speech is really just a great conversation with your audience.
That's great.
How how important, as you teach folks, is having that conversation and maybe share why it's important to have that conversation.
Yeah, it's everything. And I think it relates to what we were saying before. It's like sometimes people get on stage and they start relating to it like it's not people, like they're supposed to be perfect. I'm like, no, just stop that. Like this is not an be all and end all rule, but to get people out of this, I often say, if you wouldn't do it when you're having coffee with a friend, don't do it on stage. It's like if you wouldn't speak at a friend for 2 hours nonstop, don't do that on stage. Slow down, ask questions, check in, are they following? Like all these little micro cues that you naturally do when you're having a conversation. If you do that with a live audience, they're going to feel appreciated and respected, and they're going to feel like you're listening because you are.
Yeah, that's what I always say. I can't remember the last time anyone brought a PowerPoint to a date or to a dinner party with me, and they were great. They were fine. They got through the whole night without having any issues with. And so why do you need that? Why do you need that? Why do you have a
I think it's
script?
actually why people go into that style. I mean, for one, probably many of us were told to do this in high school,
Oh,
and
of
we
course,
just
of
assumed
course.
that that's the way. But I think it's a question of safety, and I call that the old school method. And I think because the experience of being on stage, there's a lot more energy, there's a lot more attention, there's a lot more sensation running through the body. We can call that fear if we really want to. The way people deal with that is to try and cuddle into the safety of their minds. It's like, if I just memorize this, I'm going to be okay. And it's like, I'm going to disconnect as much as possible from how scary this is. And I'm going to go into this tiny little cave in my head, and I'm just going to dictate my speech from there. And for me, with the enlivened approach I teach, it's like, let's start with the safety being connection. You're not going to know what to say. I might not even give you a topic. But what we're going to invite you to do is just to come into what it feels like to be safe with this audience, and to recognize you don't actually have to say anything to be safe. Sooner or later, people come to that.
That's a hard one too. It's like when you're going into an
But
elevator and you, how many
that's a good
people
practice
just,
for the elevator.
yeah, I know. That's when I started, that's what I used to do. I would just like, I am going to talk to somebody on this elevator. And it just got to the point where you weren't so afraid.
Mm.
Well, we could probably talk, you and I, for a lot longer on this, but it is time now for me to share my screen with the contact information of Miroslav. So if you have just been listening, you should have grabbed a paper and pencil and took notes. But if you have not, all this information will be on my YouTube channel, Vicki Nethling. Please subscribe, as well as on my findyourleadershipconfidence.com. But if you are watching, you can take a screenshot of this, all the contact information. I will orally give the website for you that are just listening. All right, so the website is Miroslav P. So MiroslavP.com. On Facebook, it's myky.petrov. LinkedIn, the Miroslav Petrovic. And then Instagram is the Miroslav Experience. Pinterest is the Miroslav Experience. And YouTube is at Miroslav Petrovic, the capital M, capital P, capital T. I'm going to turn it over to Miroslav to talk about his call to action, what you'll find on the website or the social media sites, and a little bit about his book. It's over to you.
Thank you. So firstly, you can reach out to me on any one of these social medias. Say you listened to the podcast with Vicki. If you enjoyed it, you can let me know what you enjoyed. I appreciate hearing how this work ripples out into people's lives. And if you'd like to take the next step, I have a book which is available on Amazon, and it should even be on Audible. And if it's not, it will be very soon. I don't know when they're going to put it up there. But the book is essentially my journey from being very shy, very introverted. We came to Australia when I was a refugee. We came as refugees to Australia. I used to stutter a lot when I was younger. Probably shyest child in both my primary school and high school years. So the fact that I ended up speaking was very not expected for everyone, including me. And there's a lot of wisdom I share there, and both going through the social aspect of that into the business aspect of it, and recognizing that this is where I had to make my career. And then the second half of the book is where I go into some of the deeper pieces of how to do this in your own life. So working with fear, getting more confident on stage, building relationships. And that was written in a thesis, which was through Monash University here, who specialize in education. And then I came back and rewrote the thesis in a way that's usable for the everyday person. And I'm told that the book is very engaging. I had one review on Amazon where someone wrote, "I'm choosing to read this in the bath instead of watching my favorite Netflix show." So if you enjoy it, let me know.
Miroslav, you were awesome. So many great pieces of advice. And I definitely think that we'll need to do this again and delve into some other aspects of speaking and what you do as a coach. But for now, I'd like to thank you for being a guest and remind everyone, life is a journey. That's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Nettling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nettling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.